it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 6 of my 2020 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be creating a card using Sunny Studios Victorian Christmas and winter scenes. So I've stamped out the images I'm using on some Nina Solar white cardstock with Lawn Fawn jet black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. So my house is a kind of blue-gray tone, and I wanted to color this house the same. So I chose B93, B95, B97, and B99. So I'm using that B99 to lay in some dark shadows just in a few spaces, and I'm using it really sparingly because that color is really strong. So I'm going very carefully around the strings of lights. I also added some to the bottom there on the sides of the little porch rails, and I'm going up around the top part as well, just being really careful to use the very tip of my marker so I only lay down the smallest amount of ink as possible. I'm going to do that over the porch as well because that would cast a shadow. Just going right between those little light bulbs, and then I'm going to grab the B97 and begin to blend that out. So this image is quite detailed, but I personally love images like this. If you're somebody who really enjoys coloring and you just want to be able to take your time and have fun with it, this is the perfect image for you. I was listening to an audiobook while I was filming. Well, I always listen to audiobooks while I'm filming, but it just helps me to relax and enjoy my time, and you know, just, I don't know, coloring is like therapy to me. It really is. It just kind of, all your troubles kind of fall away and you're just focused on the image in front of you, and you're trying to make the world on the page look beautiful, and somehow it just seems to make the real world a little bit better as well. And I know that probably sounds a little cheesy, but that is really truly how I feel about coloring. It just makes my world a happier place. So I'm going to continue just using that B97 and pulling out that B99 a little bit farther so I get a nice blend between those shades. And then I'm also going to outline the edge of that part that is bumped out, because that would have a little bit of shadow on the edges and where the porch roof meets it as well. And then I'm going to move on to the B95, and I'm just going to continue to carry that color out and get closer and closer to the middle portion of the house, which is where I would think that the most light would hit, especially in the areas that aren't obstructed by, you know, like a roof line or the porch roof or anything like that. So the area below the porch I actually filled in completely with that B95. I figured that would be the most shadowed area. And then I'm just going to continue blending out that B97, pulling that color down, and just working over the edges so that there's a little bit of a harsh line there. So I just want to soften that a bit and, you know, create as smooth of a blend as I possibly can. And then when I'm finished with that B95, I'll move on to my lightest shade, which is that B93. I only left a little bit of space left for that shade, but it's really going to create a nice highlight. So I'm just making sure to catch the edge of that B95 and pull it down into those white areas with the B93, so that I have as smooth of a transition as I possibly can get, and just fill in the rest of that white space. So the main color of the house was the longest portion. That was the one that was going to take the most time. Everything else is teeny tiny and will go pretty quick. The roof I'm going to color in warm grays. I'm using W3, W5, and W7 for that. So starting with that W7, I'm going to put a shadow up under those snow drifts that are on the top of the roof and then on the bottom edge of the roof as well. So I'm pulling that color toward the center. And then I'll do the same with the porch roof. I'm just going to do a really thin line. And then on the bottom edge, I'm going to add just a few little touches in a couple places because there's not a lot of space there. And then I'll bring in the W5 and just catch the edge of the W7 and pull that down toward the center. The same with the bottom edge, just pulling that up. So my highlight is going to be right across the middle there. And I'll do the same on the porch roof, just being really careful to do a thin line so I can still squeeze all three of those shades in. There will only be a little bit of the W3 on the porch roof, but that's fine. That one actually would have more shadow on it anyway, since it's underneath the shadow of the house. So I'm just blending out with that W3. And that shade did push the W5 away quite a bit on the top. So I am going to come back and do a second layer. But first I'm just going to color in the very edge of the roof where the strung lights are with that W3. And now I'll go back with that W5 and just flick in a little color toward the center and then go back over that with the W3. For the steps and the edge of the porch, I wanted to use a different gray combo, so I went with some cool grays. I'm using C3 and C5, just a little light shading on the porch with that C5. I did a bit more on the steps, and then blending that out with the C3. And then on the porch, I decided to also bring in the C1, and just went across that real quick and easy. I also used that C1 to just add a tiny bit of shading inside the door panels. And then I'm moving on to the windows. I wanted them to look like there's lights on inside. So I'm using Y000 and Y11. I just laid in a little of the Y11 first and then blended up with the Y000. And then I did bring in the Y13 and did kind of a little dot in the center of each window pane as if there were maybe like a candle there. For the Christmas wreath and the two pine trees, I'm going to use G24 and G28. So I basically just outlined the outside edge of the wreath with that G28 and then blended in the center with the G24. And then for the pine trees, I'm going to take that G28 and put a shadow right up under those snowdrifts. And those snowdrifts are actually pretty big in relation to what is showing that would be green. So there's not a lot of space there. So just these two colors are going to work perfectly. So I'm going to blend that out with the G24. And I'll do the second tree off screen just because it's exactly the same. For my reds, I'm using R29 and R39. So I'm going to add a little bit of shading with that R39 on either side of the bunting and also color in the centers of the bows. And then I'll color in the rest of the bows and the middle of the bunting with that R29. And again, those are super tiny areas, so just holding that marker straight up and down and using the very tip and light pressure is how you're going to get into those tiny little spaces. And I'm also taking that R29 and coloring in every fourth light bulb. And I think I might have messed up on one of them, but it's totally fine. I don't think it's really noticeable in the final card. And I made sure to do that on the lights that are on the porch roof as well. Next, I'll take the RV14 and I'm going to color in every fourth of the light bulbs with that as well. And that's where I realized I kind of messed up, but that's okay. I just went to the right of the red light bulbs on all of them except for the first one. And then I use Y15 to color in some more of the light bulbs. So I'm going to have 4 different shades of light bulbs. Red, pink, yellow, and green. So my green ones are going to be with YG07. So I'll just fill in the rest of those. And then for my pine tree trunks, I'm going to use E25 and E27. Just use a little shadow with the E27, blend it out with the E25. And then I'll take the BG10 and add a little light shading to all of the snowdrifts. So both on the trees and the house. And I'm just kind of dotting it here and there. I'm not coloring in the entire thing. Mainly just the parts that are kind of bumped out. So once I finish those on the second tree, I will trim these 3 images out with their matching dies. For my background, I've taken the Fancy Frames rectangle and die cut that out of some white cardstock. And then I'm going to separate those pieces and cut the center portion in half, just at a little bit of a slope. So I'll save the bottom one and the 2 frames, but on the top one, I want to add some ink blending. I want to create a night sky, so I'm starting with faded jeans, and I'm going to blend that over the entire top of that panel. And then I will bring in some chip sapphire. And with this one, I'm just going to come in from the edges and darken those up a bit. Kind of create just a little bit of a vignette around the sides. And then I'll go back to my faded jeans and just blend that center. And then I wanted to add some snow. So I'm taking some Copic opaque white, and I'll add that to a small acrylic block and water that down with a little sprayer. I'll mix that up with an old paintbrush and then flick that off the edge of the acrylic block so that it creates that splatter effect and I get some nice different size droplets. So I'll set that panel aside to dry, and in the meantime I'm going to stamp my sentiment on the bottom part of that middle portion. So I'm using Lawn Fawn's Lobster ink because it's a nice bright red to match the coloring, and I'm stamping the sentiment that came with the Victorian Christmas stamp set, which says Season's Greetings. So I stamp that down twice for a nice bold impression. And then I'll pop my card base in my MISTI, which is made from Lawn Fawn's Mermaid cardstock. I just scored and folded it to a standard top folding A2 size card. And I also added a piece of scratch paper behind the panel because the stamp that I'm using from Winter Scenes is going to go off the edge. And I'm also adding a sentiment from the Inside Greetings Holiday stamp set. And I stamped that with Lawn Fawn Peacock ink, and I'm using my Pink and Main microfiber cloth to just rub over the door of my MISTI to make sure that I get a nice even pressure, since that the little Winter Scenes stamp at the bottom is pretty detailed with all those little windows. So now I'm ready to put my focal panel back together. So I'm going to fit those 2 pieces of the frame back inside each other, and then I'll add the winter sky and the snowdrift. And I just did this upside down so that I can tape them back together with a little bit of Scotch tape. I'm just using regular Scotch tape from Walmart or wherever. Just to hold those panels together so that they don't pop apart, especially when it goes through the mail. You just want to have those little edges sealed up so that your card doesn't kind of fall apart before it gets to its recipient. So I just used a couple little pieces to hold those down in place until there's no areas kind of bulging out. And then I flip that back over and I'm ready to start adhering my images. So I'm going to begin with my house, since that's the largest image and the focal point on the focal panel. So I'll adhere that first with a little liquid glue. And I'll line that up in the center, just a little bit above that sentiment. I wanted to kind of have equal space from the top of the roof to the edge of the frame as to the bottom of the sentiment with that edge of the frame. And then I'll take the 2 trees and I'm going to add those on either side of the house. It's just going to set that house a little bit back in the scene. It's going to create a little bit of depth. And also having a tree on either side just creates that symmetrical look that the house already has with the placement of its lower windows and the bunting and all of that. So the pattern papers that I'm using are from the Very Merry 6x6 pack. So I'm going to choose a couple patterns from this one to layer on my card base. And I really liked this candy cane print, so I wanted to use that one for sure. And I'm going to add in this red stripe, and then I'm also going to add in an additional one in a minute, but I'm going to die cut the candy cane piece with the outer die from Frilly Frames Quatrefoil, and then I used some pink crosshatch patterns and die cut that with the Slimline Basic Borders. I just chose the one with the small scallop, and the red stripe I just trimmed down with my paper trimmer. So I'm going to add a little liquid glue on the pink one right below that scallop, and I'll line my red pinstripe right up on top of that, and then I'll do the same with the bottom pink scallop. So again, I'm just sticking with that symmetrical theme. So this is going to have the same pop of pink on the top and bottom of that panel. So I'll add some more liquid glue to the back of this and adhere it to that candy cane print, which I have not run through my die cut machine yet. I have only trimmed that down to size with my paper trimmer. So I'm going to take that outer die from the Frilly Frames Quatrefoil, and I'm going to line that up where I want it on this panel and run the whole thing through my Spellbinders Platinum 6. And that way the whole thing will have that stitching detail on the outside edges. So now I can adhere that down to my card front, and it's going to cover that up completely. That outer die is the same size as an A2 standard size card. And I'll just smooth that into place, making sure that it's lined up nice and straight. I've also added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel, so I'll peel off those release papers, line that up in the center, and then press that down into place. And as a final embellishment, I bet you guessed it, I'm going to add some Stardust Stickles. So I'm going to add that to all of the snowdrifts. I'm going to put it on the trees and also to all of the snow that is on the house. So it'll just give me that nice sparkly look of fresh fallen snow. And I'm just using the very tip of that nozzle and squeezing with very light pressure so it doesn't squeeze out too much, and then kind of dotting it along because those snowdrifts, especially on the house, are super thin. And I'm going to use that same pressure to go ahead and dot a little bit of that Stardust Stickles over each of the light bulbs as well. So barely squeezing at all because those are super tiny, but I just wanted to add a pop of glitter that will just look so pretty when it catches the light, and it just really brings that feeling of Christmas. So once I finish that, it's going to complete my card for today. I will lift that up to the light so you can see how pretty it looks when you tip it, and I'll give you another peek at the inside as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed day 6 of my 2020 holiday card series. If you did, please be sure to give the video a thumbs up and subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If you're interested in any of the supplies that I used today, you can find those listed and linked below the video. And if you'd like to keep watching, here is day 6 of the previous 2 years of holiday card series. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.